Okay, so here we are with the claim of definition essay, our first major essay for the semester. First of all, we want to look at why it is that we define. We do it first of all so that we can function and communicate smoothly. If we don't all know what the same words mean, then getting around is going to be pretty difficult. Writers have an obligation to define words or phrases that may be difficult for a reader. Those words may be difficult because they're jargon, or because they are abstract, or because they're complex, or because they are controversial. When you are a writer, it is your obligation, really, to give definitions for the different words that you're using, not necessarily so that we all agree with them, but so that we at least know where you're coming from, so that the rest of your argument makes sense. When you do a claim of definition essay, the kinds of things you want to talk about are what is it or what is it like, how is it classified or interpreted, how does the meaning change in different contexts. For example, take a word like catfish. Like we all know that catfish is a fish that you can cook and eat and all that, but it is also a verb, right, for social media behavior when you pretend to be somebody you're not. So that is a word that changes meaning in different contexts. The goals of defining vary depending on what you want to do. You do have denotative definitions, and those are always out of the dictionary. Denotative definitions are accurate, but they are very boring. Like nobody reads the dictionary for kicks because it's dull, okay? Useful, but dull. And then you have definitions that are connotative in nature, and a connotative definition is like a cultural definition. So that's how you can think of it, as denotative definition from the dictionary, so they all have D's, whereas a cultural definition is a connotative definition, so those have C's. So if we go back to the catfishing example, catfish based on the definition in the dictionary is going to be a fish, but we also know it as a cultural definition of social media behavior. Your definition paper is going to vary a little bit in tone depending on your topic. For example, a couple of years ago, a guy wrote a paper on a ginger, on what are gingers. That had a pretty light-hearted tone. One time a girl did Hakuna Matata. That was a pretty light-hearted tone. If your word is something like depression, then obviously that's going to have, a heavier tone to it. What you will want to do in your paper is to define an abstract word, and you'll want to use connotative and denotative definitions. When we talk about using an abstract words are things that don't have one specific meaning. Like you can say dog, and we all pretty much know what a dog is. But if you say love, we all sort of have a different idea of love, and we all sort of have a different idea of hatred or rage or freedom. Those are all abstract words, and those are the only kind of words that you want to work with in your paper. For your thesis statement, what you're going to do is define whatever you think this abstract word means. Your thesis statement should not be cited because it shouldn't be from another place. It should just be from your own head, and it should certainly not be the dictionary definition, okay? Your thesis statement is whatever you think your abstract word means. What students typically do is a really simple construction. Love is whatever. Marriage is whatever you view these words to mean. After you have your thesis, that's your claim. That's what you're saying this word means. And then you essentially prove your claim with the defining techniques that we're going to look at right now. There are 9 of them. You might want to take notes on them as you go. First off is definition by classification, and I actually think this one is one of the harder ones to do. Classification is when you take something and you sort of you categorize it, or you label it. I think it's easier to understand with an example. So Christmas, let's say Christmas is our word. Christmas is a holiday. Okay, that's how we categorize it. That's how we classify it. Christmas is a holiday. Holiday is its classification. So in order to do the classification technique, you want to talk about how Christmas is different than other holidays. Okay, so how Christmas is different than Easter or Hanukkah or Thanksgiving or Super Bowl Sunday or whatever the case may be. That is how you do classification. You put the word in its class and tell us how that word is different than other words in its class. The next one you can do is definition by synonym. Synonym is 2 words that are alike in meaning, okay? So if you wanted to do this technique, you would do something like this. So for example, I have jealous as my example. So if I were going to write about jealous using the synonym technique, I would talk about how, to me personally, jealous has sort of a, I don't know, like like it's pretty commonplace, right? Like we have all felt jealous at some point in our lives. We've all wanted something someone else has had. And I think the word is thrown around a lot. Like, oh, I'm so jealous of your sweater. And I think it's become like a shortened term like jelly. Like I'm so jelly of whatever. I don't know. You guys are younger than me. I just say jealous. So you have jealous, which is sort of the commonplace term. And then to me, envious is like a sophisticated kind of jealous. Like you can be jealous over anything, but you're only envious over like the big deal kinds of things. And then to me, covetous has an even larger meaning. To me, it has a very biblical feel to it, okay? Like, to me, you don't really covet a sweater, okay? You tend to covet something like your neighbor's wife or what have you, all right? So if I were going to talk about the synonym defining technique, and if I were going to talk about jealous, I would talk about in my paragraph how jealous is sort of the everyman, the commonplace desire for something else, whereas envious is like sort of a step up. You really, really want something, and the covetous is like you have to have it or you're never going to be happy ever, ever, ever. That's what I would talk about, because that's how I think of jealous with synonyms with envious and covetous. Definition by dictionary is the next one, and that one is actually really easy, and it will work for all of you. So here's what you want to do if you choose to use that technique. You want to actually look up your word in the dictionary, and you want to give us what the dictionary says, and make sure you cite it, because anytime you take information from somewhere else, that needs to be cited. So earlier in class, I looked up lonely, and lonely means, the dictionary says that lonely means being without company. And that's true. I mean, certainly you can say that being without company is lonely, but lonely is also a lot more than that. Certainly you can be with a group of people and still feel lonely. So I would say that's why the definition is not substantial enough. And that's what you want to talk about if you choose to do this defining technique. You give us your definition from the dictionary, and then you talk about why that doesn't work. You talk about what is wrong with it. Okay? Definition by negation is the next one. Definition by negation is also really easy, so you should all consider giving it a go. Basically, you discuss your word by telling us what it isn't. Okay, so what is a liberal? You would tell us what a conservative is. What is a wife? Describe a husband. What is a... I don't know, I can't think of anything else. So tell us what it is by telling us what it is not. Definition by example is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, you tell us what it is by showing us an example. Okay, so if I were going to talk about tragedy, what is a tragedy? I could talk about Hamlet, A Doll's House, Death of a Salesman, whatever. When I think of tragedy, I think of Shakespeare and like Shakespeare's tragedies, like Othello and Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet and all that good stuff. And technically, for Shakespeare's work to be a tragedy, everybody has to die. Pretty much everybody has to die. The last scene is typically a bloodbath of some kind. Okay, so if I were going to talk about tragedy, and perhaps I would discuss Hamlet, Othello, whatever play I would want to talk about, and then talk about why, because everybody dies. Okay, when you do an example, it's not enough just to say, Hamlet is a tragedy, and leave it at that. You have to go deeper and develop a little bit more what exactly makes Hamlet a tragedy. Okay? So make sure you're not just listing a bunch of examples. You have to actually develop them and describe why they are examples of whatever your word is. Definition by cause effect is also fairly self-explanatory. So you're telling us either the causes or effects. I think effect is a little easier, but you can do either one. So the cause or effect of whatever your word is. Okay, so we have a couple of examples. Let's talk about printing press. So because of the printing press, we have books, and because we have books, like the Bible is the most widely published book, so then people read the Bible, and then Christianity spreads, etc., etc. So whatever causes or effects your word has is what you would want to talk about there. Definition by etymology is the next one down. Now, etymology is a scary word, but it means something pretty simple. Okay, basically, etymology is tracing a word back to its original meaning. Okay, because words change meaning quite a bit through time. Think of catfish, our earlier example. Like my grandfather never would have understood catfish as a verb at all if he just wouldn't have understood it because they didn't use the word in that manner in his time. Okay. We actually have in our classroom, a great big dictionary of etymology if you wanted to look at it there. We also have, I think it's called etymononline.com. You could just Google etymology though, and it'll have a number of words and it will show you their original meaning. So you can look up like if it's French or, its original language, the year that it was created and what its original meaning was. We have an example here. Breakfast is Old English. They would say come and break your fast, which makes sense because you wouldn't have eaten since the day before. And my guess is that none of you have been invited to come and break your fast, but you've probably all been told to come down to breakfast. Okay, so the context, the literal definition has changed, but our usage has changed a little bit. So when you use etymology, you want to do it a couple of different ways. So first of all, you would look up your word in the etymology dictionary, and you would discover that either the word has changed meaning or the word has not changed meaning. Either way, it's significant. For instance, the word love has not really changed in meaning ever since it was created, which makes sense because that would indicate that humans generally have felt love since the beginning of time when we were able to create this word. Okay? So once you know if your word has changed meaning or not, then you can move forward. If your word has changed meaning, you want to talk about the significance of that. Why did it change from this to this? It's whatever you think. Or if the word has not changed, that's fine too. Why do you think it is that love hasn't changed, or faith hasn't changed, or rage hasn't changed, or whatever your word is? Definition by process or operation is your next one down. So basically you tell how it works. Okay. For example, there's a book, and I can't really think of the name. It's like the 5 Languages of Love or something like that. Basically this guy wrote a book about how people display love in one of 5 different ways. It was like through gift giving, or through like service, like doing favors, or through kind words, or whatever. So that's a process. Those are all processes of how something works. Okay. Definition by description is kind of hippie in nature. So if you are interested in creative writing, this one's probably a good one for you. Basically, you tell us sort of what your word can be. We know what it is because you've told us what it is through connotation and denotation. So what else can it be? So a book is a window to the world, or a friend when no one else is, or whatever the case may be. Okay? So those are your 9 defining techniques. If some of them scare you, then don't worry, you don't have to do them. You only need to use 5 of them. Okay? A minimum of 5. A couple other tips for a definition paper. Please don't start with According to Webster's Dictionary because it's super boring. Your title should not just be the word that you're working with. So if I am defining a tragedy, my title would not be tragedy because that is also boring. Your definition paper is an expression of your opinion, but it's not an out and out argumentative paper. So you're not rallying the troops or anything like that. You're just telling us what you think. We do want to refrain from using the second person. That's you and your. You can use the first person if you want to, but you should really work for the third person as much as possible. Organization in a paper like this is really pretty easy. You want to have your introduction, and then each body paragraph should be a new defining technique. Please don't combine them. Okay, they should all be separate. If you want to talk about why your word matters in the introduction, that would work just fine. If you freak out about introductions, then write your body of your paper, write your defining techniques first, and then go back if you need to, and write your introduction. You should have a minimum of 7 paragraphs, your intro, your 5 body paragraphs, and then your conclusion. What you are being asked to do is please create an argument, a claim of definition. You should use an abstract word, should be abstract in nature. Should be 3 to 5 pages with a works cited page. You must use at least 5 defining techniques. You must have a minimum of 3 sources. All of your sources should be credible. If you want to use a website, you only get 1, and a website is like a .com, .org, that kind of stuff, and it must be credible. If you have fewer than 3 credible sources, the essay will not pass, and at least, you should have no more than 25% of the essay to be outside sources. So we really want the majority of the work to be from your own head. And you can take a look at this. This is how you will be evaluated. So, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to email me. Also, if you are not entirely sure what you want to do for a topic, please feel free to email me that as well. You might want to email like a couple of words that you're that you're thinking about, and I will get back to you.